It's an honor to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Yogendra Yadav, a public intellectual, political thinker, and longtime advocate for democratic rights and ecological justice. In 2012, he was among the founders of Aam Aadmi Party and went on to establish Swaraj India. He was involved in the movement against the Citizenship Amendment Act, which was in the apex committee that guided the farmers' protest in 2020-21, and walked from Kanyakumari to Kashmir with the Bharat Jodo Yatra. He's currently the national convener for the Bharat Jodo Abhiyan. Mr. Yadav is here to ask a thought-provoking question to this audience. What kind of India do we seek? Mr. Yadav invites us to look beyond the narrow metrics of GDP and industrial growth and towards a vision of India rooted in ecological wisdom, cultural resilience, and participatory democracy. He asks us to imagine a future where dignity and sustainability take precedence over speed and scale. With that introduction, let's please give a big round of applause to Mr. Yogendra Yadav.
Thanks for the kind introduction. And thanks to the Hopkins India Conference for this opportunity to speak on something that I don't normally get to speak about as a political activist. Working for the opposition in India. I must underline that very clearly. I mostly get to speak about things of the day and how to strategize, how to think of resistance. And I welcome this opportunity to talk a bit about what is deep politics. What I'm speaking today is also politics, but a bit away from here and now, a deeper politics that must guide our political action. My point today is a simple question to the reigning deity of our times, or may I call it the reigning superstition of our times? We call it modernity. And the superstition is this, that the present or the past of global north, developed world, advanced capitalist societies, call it by any name. The superstition is that the past or present of these societies gives us a glimpse, gives us an image of the future of the rest of the world. This superstition guides so much of what we call expert knowledge, of what we call wisdom, of the plans, of everything that is embedded in our thinking. And a political activist like me thinks that there is something fundamentally wrong with this way of thinking about it. And hence my question. I question it and I call it a superstition for the simple reason that actually if you look at the world with unblinkered eyes, if we look at history, this has never been the case. As a matter of fact, it has never been the case that societies that we call modern, advanced, that they led the same life. Every historical study tells us that each of these countries, which we today put under the bucket of global north, had a very, very distinct trajectory. To assume that all of them had one single path, which everyone else is likely to or condemned to repeat, is based on a simple false assumption. It is also false because what we are trying to emulate is not the biography of these societies of the global north. It is the autobiography which is presented to us and which we have accepted as the truth. Trying to live someone else's life is bad. Trying to live someone's autobiography is worse, because that's actually never happens. This is what we are trying to do in the name of what we call development, what we call modernity. So it hasn't been the case. It will never be the case, simply because modernity has an inbuilt tendency, a structural imperative to diversify. It is because different elements of what we call modernity unfold themselves in distinct sequences. Therefore, the life of modern societies is bound to manifest itself in multiple paths. And finally, I call it superstition because it is impossible for me to imagine that this life can be replicated anywhere else in the world. Every time I come from India to the US, I look at the number of cars, I look at air conditioners, I look at the large houses. I do not resent that. Don't get me wrong. I don't envy people with very large houses. I do wonder if those houses and those cars and this much of fuel can actually ever be made available to 7 billion people who live on this earth. Or do we need to colonize a few more earths, a few more planets for that? Just as a certain kind of colonialism has made this world to be what it is today. So it never happened. It will never happen. It should never be tried. That's why I call it superstition. Therefore, to my mind, there is just no other option except to think on our feet. Thinking is one thing which should never be sublet. Contract farming, many other things should be farmed out. Thinking is something which should normally not be farmed out. So we have to ask some big questions of our own. What does our future look like? What should it look like if we could shape it? What kind of India do we want to seek? Can we dream of something beyond the stale dream of a modern, developed superpower with the cutting-edge technology and X-trillion-dollar economy? I'm picking phrases which are used in my parliament, phrases used by my prime minister. And when I see my prime minister say, our dream is to become a developed country, I cringe. After 70 years, I understand if in 70 years you cannot change the reality. But if in 70 years you cannot change your dream, that's awful. Can we dream of something beyond a mirage that we have been chasing breathless and mindlessly? Is another world possible? That's a question I invite you to think. And instead of thinking about in abstraction, allow me to spend 5 minutes on thinking on one concrete issue, namely that of Indian agriculture, something that I have been associated with. I'm not a farmer, I wouldn't claim to be one. I've been involved in farmers' movement, and in that famous farmers' protest that took place in India, for 13 months, the national capital was surrounded by 100,000 farmers. I had the honor to be on the apex committee of that protest. So it is from those kinds of experiences that I draw and ask a question. The question is about the future of Indian farming. The fact is that Indian agriculture was in no good shape even before that great protest of the farmers. Indian agriculture faces an economic, ecological, and existential crisis. Indian agriculture desperately needs a reform. It is at a dead end. but reforms not of the kind that have been thrust upon the farmers. We need reforms of the kind the farmers need and want. So every Indian wants Indian agriculture to reform. Every politician wants Indian agriculture to reform. No one is willing to entertain the suspicion that farmers may have some sense of what they wish to reform about. Everyone thinks that I need to tell farmers about how they need to reform. So let's think about how Indian agriculture could be reformed the way farmers need it and the farmers want it. Farmers are indeed open to learning and change, provided they see the benefits. The future of Indian farming cannot be the past of European or North American farmers. The dominant language in the Indian policy establishment is, you want to help the farmers? And as someone put it crassly, the best way to help the farmers is to help them cease to be farmers. This is the dominant understanding that defines much of Indian planning. Help the farmers quit farming. That's the best way to help them. We must give up on the false dream of extending green revolution paradigm to the entire country. So these are the dominant fantasies of our policy establishment, that one day India will have only 5% people who would do farming, as it happens in Europe or in America. One day we would have corporations that will take over agriculture of India, and that will, production will go up. India would be a developed nation. Part of those fantasies is that we would extend what is called green revolution to the rest of the country. Replicating high input, water guzzling, chemical intensive agriculture throughout the country is both impossible and undesirable. Small farm size is here to stay. Average holding in India is less than 1 hectare. Agriculture and allied activities will continue to engage about 2/5 of our workforce. Currently, they engage about half of our workforce. Since no alternative avenues of employment are around the corner, what most policy analysts forget is that there is no growing urban industry waiting to absorb the people who would leave farming. There's nothing of that kind. It's only unemployment and urban slums that are waiting for farmers who leave their villages. Most Indian farmers don't have much capital to invest. Canal-based irrigation cannot be extended to the entire rain-fed agriculture. Future solution for India must be based on these real-life conditions. At the same time, we cannot simply go back to traditional agriculture that never faced the challenge of producing adequate and nutritious food for 1.4 billion people, with an average lifespan of 70 years. We have inherited a rich knowledge base of agricultural practices, but it needs to be filtered and adapted through modern science. Markets, including international food markets, are here to stay. And so is the need to keep food inexpensive for the large segments of poor outside the farming sector. Hence, the state must step in to create infrastructure for production and storage, to subsidize farmers in order to keep food affordable, and to regulate domestic and international markets. So neither of these two things, one is to replicate the journey of Europe and America in Indian agriculture, or to go back to our golden era of traditional Indian agriculture. None of these are options. And my simple point is, modernity is all about looking ahead, creating something specific to your need. What made European modernity at a certain moment such a great achievement of human history was that it refused to look back, it refused to look aside. It was willing to think of absolutely new solutions to situations which were unprecedented in human history. What Indian agriculture faces is something similar, an unprecedented situation for which we have to come up with new solutions. Therefore, the future of Indian agriculture lies in following an Indian path designed for our agroecological conditions, our limited resources with very little capital, and contemporary needs. This involves pursuing three goals simultaneously. I call this econormics. What we need is econormics. There is ecology in it, there is normativity in it, and X is the economics, the smart, rational economics part of it. We need to combine all the three things. Making agriculture economically viable for the farmers, shifting to ecological agriculture that is sustainable for the farmers and for the consumers, and ensuring social justice for marginal sections of the farming and non-farming communities. All these three objectives need to be pursued simultaneously if we have to think hard about Indian agriculture. First, the challenge of ensuring income security to the farmers. A key reform here would involve legal entitlement to minimum support price. I would not bore you with the technicality of it, but the idea involves the state stepping in to ensure, to give a legal guarantee of a floor fair price. This is what the farmers have been demanding. This does not require the government to purchase all the crops. What we need is a deft combination of expanded procurement, intelligently designed deficit payment systems, timely and selective market interventions, and tweaking of international trade policies, which is very critical in the light of what's going to happen in the next 2 or 3 months, because India is going to sign a trade agreement with the US, where the interests of the farmers of India could be bartered away. And that's a major challenge there. Farm activists have insisted that agricultural markets need multiple reforms. We need more local markets, more players in the existing mandis, reduction in taxes, improvement in the warehouse receipt systems, and direct access to farmers to the consumers. The political pressure generated by farmers' movement must translate into a higher government spending on agriculture. That's the bit about ensuring higher incomes to the farmers. The government of India about 10 years ago promised doubling of income of farmers with great announcement, enormous publicity, just only that only this government can bring about. And every Indian farmer was assured that within 6 years, your income would be doubled. For 6 years, I heard nothing except doubling of income. And the day that 6 year was over, I heard nothing about it at all. Not even an explanation to say this much was achieved and this much is meant to be achieved. So income increase is one. Second is the issue of social justice. We need to attend to the issue of social justice that have been languishing. While fragmentation of land has ruled out large-scale land distribution of the kind imagined in 1950s, there is still scope to offer homestead land and parcels of uncultivated land to the landless families, while confirming the pattas once given to Dalit farmers. Adivasi farmers need the Forest Right Act 2006 to be implemented, which gave the indigenous people some right over forest land, while securing remunerative prices for their minor forest produce. While women farmers need co-ownership, the priority for tenant farmers is some kind of identification paper that entitles them to all benefits of government schemes without threatening the landowners of dispossession. Marginal farmers need a huge national effort to create and incentivize cooperatives so that they secure cheaper inputs and better market prices. All these are about ways to have a more just space in agriculture for those who truly cultivate. By some estimate, 70% of the labor that goes into Indian agriculture is done by women. And it's only men like me that you see espousing the cause of the farmers. The third issue is that of ecological sustainability. This issue cannot be postponed anymore with the end of the Green Revolution and the onset of the challenge of climate change. We simply cannot persist with a model of agriculture that leads to depletion of water, degradation of soil, indebtedness of farmers, and toxic food for the consumers. Everyone is losing out in this particular game. We must shift to low-cost, low external input approaches that can yield sufficient, affordable, nutritious, and non-toxic food for everyone. That would require crop diversification by drawing upon already existing knowledge of the appropriate crop selection based on diversity and integrated farming, mixed cropping, and crops set rotation. Instead of depending on chemical fertilizers, we must shift to creating a microclimate for soil regeneration. Plant protection and pest management must shift away from synthetic pesticides. Irrigation needs to move away from mega dams and flood irrigation to small projects, check dams, and focus on essential and efficient use of water and moisture. Seed selection must shift to locally suitable and farmer-controlled varieties. This is just to give you a glimpse of the kind of alternative that I've been talking about. An alternative that we need to think about in every single sector with some kind of depth, creating our own unique desi modernity based on our conditions, our constraints, our resources. And this is not just about India. I guess this applies to everyone. And I guess that's exactly what countries that call themselves modern and developed today did 200 years ago, 300 years ago. You might ask, are all these really alternatives to modern development? Can they take on the challenge of scale and survive in the face of giant corporations in globalized market economy? Does the practice of majority-based democracy leave any room for concerns of future generations and nature? These are valid questions. But you must also ask another valid question to counterweigh that. Can we really ever hope to offer to every Indian the lifestyle available to everyone in the global north? Is this model worth replicating? Can we afford to go on with the destruction of nature, lives, and livelihoods, which is what we have done? Once we recognize the unbearable weight of these questions, weight of questions of how we have gone about destruction in the name of development, a quest for alternatives does not remain an obsession of a mad minority. Once we realize that alternatives are not about going back to our past, but about imagining and shaping our future, this becomes a collective search. How do we make these radical alternatives feasible? What is the roadmap of transition from where we are to where we wish to go? Someone has to begin thinking about these questions. Someone has to risk being called mad and think of alternatives before we are left with nothing to think about. Thank you. And just in case someone wants to get back or respond to the things that we do, my email ID is whatever you imagine it to be, which is yogendra.yadav@gmail.com. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yogendra Yadav. Ji, please accept this small token from our side. Great. Please keep it going for Mr. Yogendra Yadav for that powerful, thought-provoking keynote.